Look, I don't know how many more times I can say this, but Star Wars Battlefront 2 is and has remained my favorite video game of all time. And one of the biggest reasons for this is its incredible campaign, Rise of the Empire, which follows the 501st Clone Trooper Legion throughout the Clone Wars and the reign of the Empire. Its story has a darker brush than your average Star Wars tale, the core gameplay of Battlefront is retained, while adding in fun-to-complete objectives and modifiers that make each level stand apart from your typical match. It's very effective at what it is, and has been the subject of several videos on this channel. But have you ever wished there was more to it? It ends in a little bit of an odd place right after the Battle of Hoth from Empire Strikes Back. That leaves another movie and a half worth of material that could have been added. And what about that period of time not covered in the movies? The beginnings of the Empire is where some of the most memorable levels of this game came from. There's a lot of potential opportunity to expand this campaign. So, I thought it'd be fun to look at that today. We will be exploring the missing levels of Star Wars Rise of the Empire. Now I will be upfront with you, whenever I started researching this video I did not find as much as I had hoped. However, I still managed to find a great deal of documented content which points to campaign elements that were cut at the last minute, missing planets which lead to new questions, and even a great deal of evidence pointing to a campaign entirely different than what we got. So, let's explore what was planned, what was excluded, and what could have been. As far as missions that were going to be included in the campaign that we can say with 100% certainty, there is sadly only one. However, I believe there's enough evidence to point to at least one other campaign mission that was planned to be included. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and start by talking about what we do know. The 12th mission in Rise of the Empire is Changing of the Guard, which sees the Empire squash a rebellion on Kamino, where the cloners have created a new strain of anti-troopers in hopes of fighting against the Empire. It's the most memorable level in my mind, due to its unique concept of having stormtroopers fight clone troopers. In the final game, this plotline only consists of a single, relatively short ground mission, but up until fairly late in development, a second part was planned. Within the game files of Battlefront 2 is still a working but unfinished mission for Space Kamino. This was meant to be a precursor to Changing of the Guard, much in the same way that the droids got a space mission for Mustafar. The level saw a fleet of ships over Kamino, including a Republic Venator and 2 Acclamators, but also consisting of multiple Rebel transport ships. The story was that the Kaminoans were hoping to send envoys to other planets in hopes of building a coalition to fight against the Empire. In order to stop this, the player would have needed to first destroy the envoy ships, followed by the Acclamators, and then finally destroying a planetary shield generator on board the Venator so that the ground invasion could begin. It's a pretty quick and easy mission all things considered, but so are most of the other space missions in the campaign. As you can see from this footage, this early version of the mission is quite incomplete, with the Venator missing most of its model. This all comes from YouTuber DylanRocket, a data miner and modder who has looked at a great deal of Battlefront's beta and demo content. He's also a pretty big fan of Godzilla Save the World, so he's alright in my book. Ironically, across all the different versions of this game, it is the PS2 demo version of Battlefront 2 which contains the most completed version of the mission, including cutscenes, dialogue, and the intro journal. On the topic of the 501st War Journal, it seems that what we got in the final game's Kamino level was actually intended for this space mission. It introduces the conflict itself, but when the level was ultimately cut, it was reworked to fit the mission we got. The original Kamino ground cutscene is far more personal in nature, and hits that emotional element of Rise of the Empire cutscenes that made this mode feel special. I can't play it in its entirety here, but I'll link DylanRocket's video comparing the two versions.
The first few kills were the hardest. After all, it's hard not to get a little spooked when the enemy screams with your voice.
Speaking of, Dylan actually took it upon himself to finish the mission, adding in the missing models and including the dialogue and objectives. I'll leave another link to this video as well as his channel as a whole. I highly recommend you go check it out.
Most of the troopers never knew about Kamino. Like a lot of things in the Empire, it never really happened.
As for full-on levels, this is the only mission that we can positively say existed. However, there is another mission that I personally believe existed at some point, and it has to do with a cut planet. Within the files of Battlefront II, every level is designated a 3-letter title based on the abbreviation for the planet. So for example, Geonosis is geo.lev, Felucia is fel.lev, and so on. However, there are a handful of folders hinting at levels that were planned but ultimately removed from the final game. For example, rhn.lev contains an incomplete version of Renvar Citadel from the original Battlefront, while another labeled bes.lev contains nothing but was obviously meant for some kind of Bespin map. Most likely Cloud City from BF1 due to its later inclusion in the Xbox Live patch. But there is another enigmatic file within this list. Like the Bespin one, kor.lev does not contain anything, and there is no corresponding planet from the first game to link it to. But I think it's pretty obvious what this mystery planet was going to be, and most people online seem to agree. Looking at other popular locations within Star Wars, starting with those letters, this mystery file was probably meant for the home world of the Sith, Korriban. Though not appearing in any of the films, Korriban had solidified itself as an iconic planet within the expanded universe. It appeared in both Knights of the Old Republic games just a few years before. And to add more fuel to the fire, Korriban would later appear in Battlefront's PSP sequel, Renegade Squadron. Campaign mission or no, it could have made a memorable addition to the game. Much like Renvar in the first, it would have been cool to see more of Legends explored in the maps. But while we can pretty definitively say this was a cut planet, we can't guarantee it was also a cut campaign level. But, I mean, come on, you can't tell me they wouldn't have included Korriban in the story mode in one way or another. And I think it's fairly easy to guess what this level would have roughly consisted of. Despite being called Rise of the Empire, one important figure is suspiciously absent. The homeworld of the Sith undoubtedly would have been visited by the Lord of the Sith, Emperor Palpatine. Darth Sidious is the only dark side hero not seen in the campaign, mainly due to his reclusive nature. He's not one to show up to the raid on Palas Massa or the assault on Mustafar, but a visit to Korriban? Possibly as some dark pilgrimage or a wicked coronation? That sounds a lot more likely. I imagine the mission premise would go something like this. A contingent of the 501st had been tasked with escorting Palpatine to some Sith temple on the planet. However, a rebel cell caught wind of this trip and decided that would be the best time to try and assassinate the Emperor. This would lead to several objectives, such as possibly holding out against a horde of assassins, maybe even needing to defend a computer-controlled Palpatine before taking control of the Dark Lord yourself, and letting his power shine. Or at least as much of his power as he has within Battlefront 2. I've always thought of him as one of the weaker heroes in the game, but hey, he can fly while dabbing, so that's something. I think an objective taking out a squad of snipers would have been really neat to see, assuming the map accounted for it. A possible final objective could have seen the Emperor retrieving a Sith holocron before eliminating a Jedi among the assassins. As I said before, Korriban would later appear in Renegade Squadron as its own map. However, I don't personally believe that this is exactly the map we would have gotten in Battlefront 2. Obviously, being built for the PSP, most of the maps in that game are considerably smaller. But it's still a look at what could have been. And at the end of the day, we can only speculate, but speculation is half the fun. I could easily see a mission like this being included in the final game, but well, I also came up with the idea, so I might be a little partial. It's hard to imagine a campaign other than what we got. The 501st story is so iconic that the thought of a Battlefront campaign without their journal seems foreign. But Battlefront 2 was developed rather quickly, releasing only a year after its predecessor. So, it's not hard to imagine that before settling on what ended up in the final game, other campaign ideas were tossed around. The evidence points to a much more basic story mode, closer to what was found in its 2004 predecessor. Going back to the PS2 beta build of the game, several cutscene files can be found. While some of these are early recordings from Tamara Morrison's campaign intros, a great deal of these cutscenes are clips from each of the Star Wars movies, just like what can be found at the start of a campaign mission in the final game. But many of these clips are far longer than the 5 to 10 second shots that we got on release, and many of them make absolutely no sense when viewed in the context of the final game story. For example, these clips include scenes from the Rebel attack on Endor in Return of the Jedi, a mission that we never got in the final game. There are also extensive clips of Han and Luke on the Death Star rescuing Princess Leia, which, again, the Death Star level within Rise of the Empire takes place long before this and features an entirely separate prison break on board the station. There are also so many extended shots which would not have all been meant for the openings of these levels. But I think the answer to some of these mysteries can likely be found in the final mission of the game. Hoth is a unique case where not only are movie clips played during the start of the mission, but we also see them played after key moments, such as destroying the shield generator and the escape of the Falcon as Vader enters the hangar. It's likely that other cutscenes were planned to play after certain objectives were completed. Take this footage from E3 2005, where you can see a clip of Vader's entrance on board the Tantive 4 before you're given the option to play as the Dark Lord. This was likely planned for many of the levels, but only Hoth retained them at release. But then how do you explain the Death Star clips? Well, clearly this mission was supposed to be somewhat different. But based off of other models found within the game, I don't think you would have ever played as the Empire in this level at all. Going back to the files, models can be found for 2 heroes, those being Luke Skywalker and Han Solo wearing their Stormtrooper disguises. I believe only Hoth offered an alternative outfit for Luke Skywalker, that being his pilot suit, but in the final game, Luke is the hero for the rebellion on the Death Star. And instead of a Stormtrooper disguise, he sports his Episode 6 Jedi look and lightsaber, not the white armor and blaster that we have here. On top of all this, there are also voice lines showing that Old Man Ben Kenobi was intended to be a hero. All of these could not have possibly been meant to just be the heroes for the instant action version of the Death Star. Every level in the final game has only one hero and villain per team, and the Stormtrooper disguises only make sense here. What I propose is that before settling on the Trooper story we got, Battlefront 2's campaign was going to be far closer to a retelling of the 6 films, letting you play not only as the clones in the Empire, but also as the Rebellion and the battle droids. Who knows? Maybe this clip of a Gungan getting sniped on Naboo plains was from an early mission covering the Phantom Menace. This comes from the first trailer released for the game, and it also includes the Millennium Falcon within the Death Star's hangar. The original Death Star mission likely then would have been closer to what's seen in the movies, letting you play as Han, Luke, and possibly Ben. It possibly would have played similar to what Pandemic would later do in Lord of the Rings Conquest, where certain story missions gave you a collection of heroes to play as instead of the basic units. I don't think campaign missions built around hero units is too crazy to think about, because even going back to Kamino's level, you get to play as Boba Fett for a majority of that mission. And I wonder what else we could have gotten in this different version. Now, while it would have been neat to see this alternative campaign, I am glad that we got the story we did. Battlefront has always focused more on the soldiers in battle, not the heroes who led them. Taking this realistic and personal story of a clone legion narrated with first-hand accounts from a war journal was definitely the right choice, giving the game an emotional element that I just can't imagine it missing. And as for the other cut missions, the story of the campaign is still just as strong without their inclusions. But it will always be fun to learn more about our favorite childhood game and see what could have been Star Wars: Rise of the Empire. Now, I actually intended for this video to be a bit longer. There are 4 maps within the base game that never got campaign levels of their own. And much like what I did for Korriban, I had planned to come up with a hypothetical mission which would have taken place on Tatooine, Endor, Dagobah, and others. I think there's actually a lot of potential in some of them. If you would like to see me make a video creating new campaign missions, then leave a comment and let me know, and I'll try and release it within the next month or so. And as I said before, go check out DylanRocket's channel for more beta Battlefront information. And if you want more Battlefront content here, then I have a playlist analyzing some of the maps from the original game. along with a retrospective on the story of Rise of the Empire, and I'm actually currently replaying this campaign for fun. So go check that out as well if you haven't already. But in the meantime, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.